Welcome to yet another live episode of Palestinapodden, coming to you from Melahuset, Oslo.
Today we're honored to have two remarkable guests with us, Jeff Halper and Issa Amro. Jeff Halper is an Israeli-American anthropologist, author, and political activist. Originally from the US, he moved to Israel in 1973 and has since become a leading voice in the Israeli-Palestinian discourse. He co-founded and directs the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, which has rebuilt nearly 200 Palestinian homes as an act of political resistance. Jeff is also a founding member of the One Democratic State campaign, and in 2006 he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize with Palestinian activists Ghassan and Doni, in recognition for their efforts and for justice and equality. Jeff is a vocal supporter of the BDS movement, the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement, and a sharp critic of Israel's apartheid policies and its project to Judaizing the occupied territories.
Issa Amro is a prominent Palestinian human rights defender and a pioneer of nonviolent resistance to Israeli occupation. Born and raised in Al-Khalil, he founded Youth Against Settlements, a grassroots organization that documents human rights violations, organizes peaceful protests, and supports Palestinian families facing daily threats from settlers and military forces. Issa has also worked with the International Solidarity Movement and inspired similar non-violent initiatives across occupied Palestinian cities. Despite arrests, attacks, torture, and pressure from both Israeli and Palestinian authorities, Issa has remained unwavering in his belief in non-violence. In 2010, he was named Human Rights Defender of the Year in Palestine by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. In 2013, the UN Human Rights Council publicly expressed concern for his safety. In 2025, Amro and Halper both were nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Minister
of Parliament.
Thank you, Ingrid Fiskå, for their long-term work with non-violent movement on the ground against Israel's occupation and apartheid.
This is going to be a very interesting conversation, so I really hope you listen and learn. And yeah, please welcome Jeff Halper and Issa Amro, and of course, Free Palestine.
Free Palestine.
How did you two get to know each other?
From the field. You know, Jeff was active in rebuilding houses, which the Israeli occupation and apartheid were destroying, demolishing, and we met in many occasions, and his organization helped us even to rebuild our center and my house now in Tel Rumeda. So they were doing great work in ICAT, and for sure, we know each other for resisting the Israeli occupation and resisting the narrative about our movement too, because he's outspoken, and I'm doing my great work on the ground to keep the land and to make Palestinian voice louder and louder, and for sure to tell everybody here the truth and to tell the real narrative about what we want and what's going on the ground.
You want to add something on?
No, that's
it's a good summary. Yeah.
Issa is very prominent, not only in the Hebron area, but of course across Palestine and internationally. So you can't be active on the ground and political without encountering Issa. We've known each other for many years, what I really respect about Issa, because it's missing in a lot of the activist community. A lot of the activism is kind of reactive. There's a demolition, or the army does something, or something happens, Sheikh Jarrah in Jerusalem, and people are out there protesting, and then they go home. I think, and you'll hear this tonight, what really sets out Issa is the activism is there and sustained over years, but it's strategic. He really reads. He knows Hebron. He knows the occupation. He knows the way Israel thinks and the way the army works. And he has strategies that are really built to counter. In other words, he counter-resists in very effective ways. Not just in a reactive way to what happened in the last hour, but he anticipates what's going to happen. And he works with the local community to give them hope and to sustain them as well, to make them sumud, steadfast, by empowering them. So I think really where Issa stands out, in my view, from most other activists, I think, maybe around the world even, is that mixture of the activism, the actually doing something, but in a very effective and strategic way that sustains your community against, and just one other half sentence. I mean, we just have to appreciate, I'm an activist, and I'm an academic activist. I don't want to forget the academic part. I'm an anthropologist by profession. But I'm an Israeli Jew. I'm privileged. So I use my privilege in ways to push the envelope, to push in a way that Issa couldn't. But I go home at night. They can arrest me. They've arrested me 100 times for an hour or two and send me home. And nobody touches me. Nobody's going to beat me. Nobody's going to shoot me. Nobody's going to really put me in jail. So I have that privilege that I use strategically, but I have it. Issa really, not only in Palestine in general, but in Hebron, I can't begin to convey the terror, the absolute state of terror that people live in a high-tech terror. I mean, the Israeli occupation is like George Orwell, 1984, or totalitarianism that Hannah Arendt wrote about, times 1,000. I mean, with the high-tech surveillance mechanisms that Israel has and the weaponry, I mean, they know where Issa is every second of the day. So and it's not only you, it's your family that's exposed as well. So to be able to be effective and to sustain it and to stand up to all that pressure and fear all these years is really something that I think makes Issa stand out. So if I could add that.
Thank you.
How was it for both of you, Issa, you in Hebron and Jeff in Jerusalem, to live there, and what led you to activism?
First of all, I'm not equal with Jeff. I am under the Israeli military law, and he's under the Israeli civilian law. And there is two sets of law in the same area for different people. This is why Amnesty, B'Tselem, Human Rights Watch, me, Jeff, and many other true human rights defenders and true human rights organizations described what's going on as apartheid. This is the apartheid. We are here in Palestine, we are not equal by law. What it means that I live under the Israeli military law, it means non-violence resistance is not allowed. I was arrested, I was ill-treated, I was indicted and convicted in the military court for practicing my rights of non-violence resistance. I was not accused of any kind of violence. So the military court sole purpose is to suppress the Palestinians, make it harder and harder for them to call for freedom. So there is no fair trial for us. There is no democracy from Israel toward us as Palestinians. Is in one hand. The other hand, by the military law, you are guilty until you are proven innocent. So you are arrested by the soldiers and sometimes kidnapped by the settlers, and you are guilty by law. You need to give evidence to the court or to the police that you are not guilty. The opposite of the system. To live as a Palestinian inside Hebron, it means you are treated as a human animal. So when many Israeli officials said that we are fighting human animals after October 7th, it's not new for us. This is how they treat us since 48, since 67, since the first Intifada, the second Intifada, after Oslo. Palestinians for them are not humans. And everything you see on the ground to make it costly for Palestinians. So me personally, I'm facing intimidation of immigration, ethnic cleansing, and violence, and everything happening to me and to my family and to my friends about the land. They want to take the land from us and they want to displace us. What to do? To surrender? To give up? To be afraid and come here and live and have a different life? Or we fight? You know, it's either that you accept to be a slave in your own country and coexist with the occupation, or you fight, you confront, and you try to shout. So for me, it's not optional. You know, nobody accepts to be treated as a slave. Nobody accepts to be treated as a human animal. And I can describe what measures Israeli occupation installed in the West Bank and even Gaza and sometimes East Jerusalem to dehumanize Palestinians. The checkpoints, the system, the inequality, the injustice, everything, even the narrative here. They describe Palestinians in the media here, in the mainstream media, as human animals, as people love to die, people don't love their children, and they just they use civilians as a human shield. I was described by Israeli officials, by Israeli media, all description of any other Palestinians. And it's not about Issa, you know, it's about every Palestinian. And I'm not the only Palestinian who is resisting the occupation peacefully. You know, the majority of the Palestinians are peacefully resisting the occupation before I was born. Even, you know, the nonviolence resistance is part of our culture and part of our traditions as Palestinians, especially the 80s, from the first year of the 80s and the first Intifada. So it's part of our struggle to really stay in the land, and we say existence is resistance. I add to that active existence is resistance. So you have to be proactive and creative and try to do actions, you know, to make the occupation costly on one hand. On the other hand, you strengthen the Palestinian community and you create infrastructure for living, that they work to remove the infrastructure for Palestinians to live, and we do infrastructure for living. And many writers and authors and scholars wrote how the Israeli occupation from 48 is working to remove any infrastructure for development, any infrastructure for Palestinians to raise their voice. This is one hand. The other hand, it's about the narrative. And we work with many international groups in Hebron and outside Hebron to increase awareness about apartheid, about genocide now, about occupation, about segregation, separation. And I live in a city. It's described as a ghost town and as a microcosm of the Israeli occupation. So if you want to understand what it means to live under the Israeli occupation, you come to Hebron. In a few hours, you understand. And even Hebron is the model which they want to, we call it Hebronization from the river to the sea. The model they want to transfer to other cities inside West Bank and even inside 48 to Jaffa, mixed cities, you know, Lod, Haifa, where Palestinians and Israelis live in the same area. So they want to have different systems with different measures to make the life of certain people with a very good life, with a quality life for Israeli settlers, and to make the other people who live next door more and more miserable. And they use now artificial intelligence and surveillance to add to the physical installation they did to and mental work they worked in the last years to put it in Palestinian minds that you have no place here to live. And yesterday the activists sent me a photo for one of the new posters was put in one of the walls in Hebron, that you have no future here. Palestine never existed and never will. They try to kill and remove our identity as Palestinians every day. So what we do, we fight. We fight to get rights. And we fight to be in the right side of history and not to accept to be slaves, or to be not able to answer our grandsons in the future when they ask us. Because I ask my father what you did against the occupation, me, and my child will ask me in a few years what you did and what are you doing to make a better future for me. So we are working, me and Jeff and many other Palestinians and few Israelis, to make a better future in this land for everybody. We welcome everybody. We don't want to remove anybody from anywhere, but in the same time, we want to be equal. We want accountability for anybody who violated our rights, who tortured us, who killed our children, who stole our land, according to the Norwegian morals and principles and the international law. We don't want more. The main reference to me as Issa, the international law. Let's use it to solve the issue between us and them, because they lie. They kill us and they claim that we are killing them. They torture us and they claim that we are torturing them. They steal our land and they claim that we are the thieves. They do everything and they twist it on us. And even, in the beginning of the war, and you all maybe following the war, Netanyahu said this war is the war between the civilized people and the uncivilized people. Palestinians didn't demolish any school, an Israeli school. Israel destroyed and demolished all the schools in Gaza. Palestinians didn't destroy any Israeli hospital. All hospitals in Gaza, 35 maybe, different hospitals and medical centers were completely destroyed. Israel destroyed the universities. I feel very mad in how come people on earth, they believe that demolishing a hospital or destroying a school is for security. And this is what's going on. This is the narrative which we as Palestinians winning now. This is something very, very important. So for me, it's my duty to resist the occupation. I am very proud of it. I am ready to pay the price. This is something very important. Many people think if you fight the occupation, you will not pay any price. No. If you want to make an enemy, try to change something. And we are change makers. We want to make a big change in Palestine and outside Palestine. And I met the foreign ministry here and I was so clear. How come Norway accepted to be punished by Israel for recognizing the state of Palestine? Norway accepted. It's not that Israel can punish Norway. Norway can punish Israel. It's the opposite. Who is Israel to punish Norway?
Yeah.
Okay, to be very honest. Okay, but they accepted here because they are acting here according to their interest, not according to the Norwegian principles and the Norwegian morals and the Norwegian respect of the international law.
Exactly. Thank you, Issa, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about being proactive and being creative, because I think a lot of the work we do is very reactive. We see something that happens and we go out to the streets and we're angry, right? So we want to ask you more about that as well. What about you, Jeff? 1973, you moved to Jerusalem, right?
Before I was born, 1970. I am born 1980.
Was it, did the activism start when you moved to Israel, or was it before you moved to Israel?
Look, I'm a child of the 60s. I graduated in the United States, the class of 1968, which was the peak of the 60s. I'm almost a poster boy. I did everything you were supposed to do. I grew up in the Norwegian part of the United States, which is Minnesota, right? In the same little town as Bob Dylan. So Bob and I grew up together. He's older than I am. I was in the civil rights movement. I was in jail in Mississippi. I was an anti-Vietnam War draft resistor. I was in the Chicago Convention. Some of the young people won't remember all these things. Of 1968, it was a huge, what they called the police riot. I was at Woodstock. You know, I did everything. I wasn't a hippie. That was the next generation. We were very political, but I did all that. And what happened actually was, it was almost like, I'm telling you, it's true, it's almost like a hand came down from the sky on January 1st, 1970, and said to us, it's over. The 60s are done. You know, they finished on December 31st. Now we're in neoliberalism, we're into Ronald Reagan, we're into a whole different kind of a reality. And I really was fed up with the United States. I mean, every time I go back, I land in Kennedy Airport, I remember why I left. You know, it's empty, it's hollow, it's stupid. And so I wanted to find somewhere, to tell you the truth, to go where I could be politically active. And as a Jew, I mean, for the wrong reasons, I was able to go to Israel. And I mean, I could have come to Norway, but what, I'm going to become some expat that gets up and tells you how to vote? I mean, Israel, in the wrong way, did give me that kind of a space, you know, to be political. And so I really went to Israel, actually, for political reasons. To find, I saw it in our language of the 60s, it was another front in the revolution. But you introduced me as an American Israeli. And that's important. And Issa emphasized the difference between us. It isn't only Israeli-Palestinian. I mean, you know, that difference as well that we've talked about. But it's the fact that I immigrated to Israel, you know. In fact, I settled in Israel. I mean, we didn't really have the concept yet of a settler colonial movement. Don't forget, 1973 is only 5 or 6 years after the occupation began. Nobody knew. The Labour Party in power had no idea where it was going. You didn't have Begin and settlers and the right. It was a whole different reality. And the hope was that, in fact, because it's a Labour government, you know, that there would be, that something good could happen, and that's what I was a part of. In retrospect, I was a settler. I mean, I came to settle. I didn't immigrate. I came as a settler to a settler colonial colony. So I call myself, in my books and so on, a settler who refuses. You know, I can't deny I'm a settler, and it's important to emphasize that. But at the same time, that makes me responsible not only for acknowledging that I'm a settler, but for really trying to change things. And that's what, it didn't bring me into the activism, because I had come with the activism, but it brought me into, you know, into really, I mean, for me, settler colonialism, which is key, we have to talk about it, is really key to understanding what's going on. That's the conceptual framework you need to understand the logic of what's happening and so on, and where we can go with it. And that was only, of course, formulated when I lived in Israel, and I began to understand it and absorb it and go with it. Just the other, you know, half point is I'm an anthropologist, and I have to say that I couldn't do my work without my anthropology. Because with anthropology, you're really trained to be on the ground with people, listen to people, understand where they're coming from, but also you're able to read the political reality on the ground, and then you have a theory, and you have concepts, you have analysis as an academic that allow you then to take what's going on and put it within some kind of a political framework. So that really is key as well.
You're both talking, especially you, Issa, you were talking about existence is resistance, and you both have specifically been non-violent activism is very important, and we've had an episode earlier about how, with a professor in Oslo that was talking about Palestinian resistance, non-violent resistance from the 30s even, which was boycotts and marches and cultural resistance. What kind of forms do you believe work, in a sense? It's a bit of a maybe strange question, but do you believe that there are some forms in non-violent resistance that works better than others?
All forms of non-violence resistance are working. And we need to be very flexible and very smart to accept the differences among each other. Because some people say, no, doesn't work, that works. We should not have any division about resistance. Resistance is resistance, and nonviolence resistance is a community resistance. So direct actions, we do it. Protests, rallies, awareness, building the community, making the occupation costly in different ways on the ground, creating an infrastructure for living that you stay. You should follow their strength. You know what they use exactly. So I was provoked today. We were in the Parliament, and I was, I'm sorry for the guy. I gave him a hard time. One of the organizations here who help Palestine a lot said, Issa, what we can do? I told them, you ask me what we can do. You are an organization, normal people. If they ask me what we can do, I can tell them, be creative, do these things. I ask people usually, and this is what I do in the ground, I do a strategy estimate to try to know exactly, with SWOT analysis, my strength, my weakness, their strength, and their weakness. So to work on that and know exactly what make you strong and what make them weak. So all types of nonviolence resistance is working. We do a lot of community activism, For example, their main policy is, what they do, the Israelis, they don't make you feel safe in your house. So you leave the area to go somewhere else. How they make you don't feel safe? By army, aggression, raid, arrest, detention, torture, and settler violence. And how you go over that? We established a video camera system, give it out to families to document what's going on. So they are afraid of camera. The soldiers and the settlers, they are afraid of camera. And we created a kind of, people who are watching settlers and watching soldiers before they come, before they attack. We know exactly where they attack, the hot spots, when they attack, We know, we observe, we try to, to monitor them, to be part of their mailing list sometimes, their even WhatsApp groups, to follow what are they plan to do to us. So we know in advance. Many times, the settlers they announced to attack certain house, and then they go to the house, they found 50 Palestinians waiting them. We don't do anything. They just see 50 Palestinians waiting them. Sometimes, one time, I knew that they will attack a Palestinian house. What to do? How I will find an excuse to be in that house? And then, you like sports. I searched on the sports calendar a football match. I brought a projector and a laptop, and I brought 50 Palestinians to watch the football match. Okay. And the settlers saw, what's going on? You know what it means to watch football match? Shouting and yelling, two people from here, people shouting to the other people. The soldiers came and looked at me. I told them, what are you doing? Watching football, what's going on? So you have to be creative and be flexible to make the families feel secure. And it's all over West Bank. Each community, they have their own way to protect each other and give the feeling of safety to, we used to make loud noise when they try to attack. So they know that we knew about their attacks or the soldiers' raid or something like that. Something else, for example, to make it costly for us and to push us away, one of their main strategies, no services. So you live in a certain area, you can't do maintenance to your house. So no plumber, no electrician, no gardening, no painting. Okay, I found a group, volunteers, skilled people. I do assessment, Okay, I go to a certain family, I do assessment of what they need. Then in 1 week, 50 Palestinians, 20 Palestinians, all of them are skilled. Someone is painting, gardening, electrician, plumber. We go to the house, we work the house with them. When you see the settlers, what to do. In one hand, we are not doing anything political between quotation, but in the same time, their policy and their system of isolating this family is not working. Okay, so we do it a lot. One of the main organizations I participated and I helped to be founded, it's giving out electricity to Palestinian families in Area C. They got crazy. How come they are Palestinians and we have 2 Israelis with us? It's called Commit Me. I'm an electrical engineer. So I took all my students to sleep in the caves in the beginning of the project to give electricity to South Mount Hebron families. So Palestinian, they didn't have electricity, no lights, So we founded a way to smuggle in the renewable energy systems to these communities. And by time, the project was all over Area C, and it's really winning, to be very honest. They attack the systems from time to time, but we train the families how to protect it. So we give services. Social life, they try to isolate you. They try to make you live alone. And you know what it means for Arab people, the social life. It's so important, okay? So we organize birthday parties, and they come, the soldiers, to see 20 children, 50 children. One time we had 200 children because we organize a birthday party for the children who are born in that month. The whole month we make a party all together, and that month, I was surprised, and we take gifts, and we usually, buy around 50 gifts. Anybody comes gets a gift, the people who are, their birthday and the ones who are participating. 200 children came, and the soldiers were shocked, and they came to ask me, what is this? It's a protest. Birthday, look what they are singing. We try to create life. They don't want us to live, we create life, and that's so big for them. And something else, now they are using surveillance and artificial intelligence to intimidate the Palestinians and to profile Palestinians. And we discovered it. I discovered it. I discovered that they are installing very advanced cameras with a blue wolf, we call it, and red wolf. Amnesty International wrote an amazing report about the surveillance and artificial intelligence being used in Hebron, because Hebron is the model, and they describe it as a city. What to do? Counter surveillance. They have their smart system. We create our own smart system in the same way, in a different goal. Our goal is peace. Their goal is violence. This is the difference. Our goal is non-violence. Their goal is to send the families away. Something else, they have PR groups. They are paid to destroy the image of the Palestinians. Mainly, we do campaigns here in Norway and all over the world to tell the Westerns who are the Palestinians. We tell them about our culture. So my philosophy in nonviolence, Israelis are here and we are here. The imbalance is so high. So no way to make peace. No way. How come? There is no equality. We are not a little bit together. So BDS brings down the occupation. I believe in leveling up Palestinians. I want Palestinians as me. I'm leveled up, okay? I have a voice. People see me as a human being. Issa is important. No. Every Palestinian is important. Everybody's life here, even. Every human being is important. So I'm not the only one who's resisting. I'm lucky that I speak English. And I come and talk and I become famous out of my activism. But all the women who are living in Masafar Yatta and Jordan Valley and the targeted areas, the hotspots, are Gandhi, and they are resisting the occupation. To get water, they are resisting the occupation. To feed their children, they are resisting the occupation. The Palestinian students who are going to school, it's nonviolence resistance. How it's nonviolence resistance? How come children don't like school? They fight the soldiers to go to their schools. They fight the settlers to reach their schools. The same for the teachers, the same for the engineers, the same for the workers. I want the workers here in Norway to know that the Palestinian workers woke up at 3 a.m. every day to go to their work because they want to pass the checkpoints where soldiers dehumanize you and humiliate you and delay you on purpose. So that narrative, and we work a lot on the narrative that we level up the Palestinians. So people ask me what to do. Usually I tell them level up Palestinians, sports, education, art, anything you do here, you should think how to level up Palestinians. So to make a friendship between the cities, sister cities, that's really important, and leveling up Palestinians, and to make the students, the researchers, to write about Palestine, to do research, because we know at the end of the day, everybody is doing research, reach the same results almost, that the occupation is bad, and the main problem is the occupation. And there are a lot of things, a lot of activism, a lot of ideas to be implemented, but do concrete actions and never lose the hope. I forgot to say something to the audience here. Thank you very much for what are you doing? You are protecting us. You are protecting our narrative. Your work is very important. Here, some people think, not only in Norway, in Europe, and all over the world, they think their work is not ending the war. No, your work is protecting lives. Your work targeting Palestinians costly. Your work is defending us, defending the land, defending our narrative. So it's very, very important. And people on the ground, they look and watch now out of the social media for who is helping them. So people tell me, Issa, wow, we have many students all over the world. Many people are protesting for Palestine. And we get your news. Maybe you don't get much news from us about what we do, but we get out of social media, we get all your news and all your protests and all your actions. And with the social media, this is very important what you do here. And it's part of the struggle because it's a global occupation. Israel is not alone. Israel is protected, backed up by many, many other countries. And even in Norway here, there are a lot of supporters. So there is no neutral country with the occupation. The occupation would not be maintained for that long without applying support from many, many countries. And here in Norway, it's one of the countries where the occupation is getting resources. So we should be very proud of our resistance. Existence is resistance, but active existence with visible action and with your protection, with your support, with your resources, we can all win. Are we winning? Yes. In spite of what we see on the ground? Yes, we are winning. Israel is accused of genocide. That's a big deal. Don't look to the result of the court. Israel is labeled, and the reputation of Israel is, it's the worst reputation to be labeled as and accused of genocide. Israel is accused of apartheid, and it's labeled as an apartheid. Israeli Prime Minister is wanted to the International Criminal Court. Did you expect that? No. He's wanted, the Israeli Prime Minister and the former Defense Minister, and now we are working to add more. One of my main asks to the Foreign Ministry here to label more settlers, more leaders as terrorists and as people who are acting against the international law. And one of my main asks, if we have more people here who have influence on the Foreign Ministry and the Parliament, Norway was the head of TIPH, Temporary International Presence Observers in Hebron. They came after the Ibrahimi Mosque massacre in 1994. They came in 1997 to give the Palestinians the feeling of safety in Hebron, in my own city. So I used to meet many Norwegian military people or civilian people who were part of the TIPH. TIPH was documenting the human rights violations of the Israelis in Hebron, Norwegian. So when I talked to the Foreign Ministry, they didn't know it. And this is something very important. They were the head of mission. It was 6 countries, but Norway was the head of mission, they documented from 1997 to 2023, because they were dismissed by Israel 2023, January 2023, they documented more than 40,000 incidents.
And they didn't know.
They didn't know
Here.
in the foreign ministry. I told them, it's the time to carry the files and give them to the ICC. If it's not now, when? If you have all that neutral documentation of human rights violations, Hebron model, take it and send it to the ICC. You can help us. This is obligation. This is a moral obligation from the Norwegian government and the Norwegian parliament and the Norwegian foreign ministry to stop the Israelis to continue with their human rights violations and their atrocities toward Palestinians. So Norway can do things, but do they want to do it or not?
Exactly.
You can make them.
Yeah.
By the way, you can make them do it. Your votes are very important. Don't give them free voting in spite of who is there, and don't give them resources. Try to campaign. They have the money, we have the votes. You are the votes. You are the people. You are the people who are choosing leadership. If they know that they will lose their election campaign because of their biased support to Israel, they will stop. Politicians will follow who makes them win. This is why Israel is very strong in certain countries, because they have pro-Israeli loopy who support certain politicians in a certain way. So we need to think, where is their strength here? And try to target it in a peaceful way, in a way to expose it and make the occupation costly for the occupiers and for the people who are denying it, who are trying to cover it, or who are supporting it.
Thank you, Issa. Jeff, I also want to ask you, is it some of the activism you do, is it some of them that you find more efficient than others? Or do you agree with Issa? All activism is...
Everything is important. I agree with that. The problem is that, Issa, for everything else, is also very focused in his resistance and who he's working with, and I think his goals, I'm not going to speak for Issa, but I think that comes through in his presentation. Part of Israel's strategy, of course, is to overwhelm us. Resistance to what? You've got hundreds of demolitions going on at this moment. You have Gaza. You have the military attacks in the camps in the northern West Bank. You have the settler violence. You've got the taking of water. You've got the building of settlements. You've got, I could go on all night with everything, the Sheikh Jarrah in Jerusalem and Silwana, just in a little part of central Jerusalem, you've got 5 or 6 or 7 Palestinian communities being threatened. We don't want to get into a situation where we're like chickens running, without their heads, running after what's happening. The reactive part. We have to react sometimes, obviously. It's important to react. The outpouring, after what happened in Gaza, I think was really important. But at the same time, and I think Issa emphasizes this, resistance also has to be proactive. And that means that it has to have some kind of a focus. Our focus is on house demolitions. I'm the head of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. Israel's demolished since the Nakba in 1948 because we don't make a separation between the occupation and Israel. That's the settler colonial idea, and that gets into, maybe we'll talk about it afterwards, the one democratic state political idea is that there is no difference. We don't talk about occupation very much because, in fact, the whole country is occupied. The whole country has been colonized. And so when we deal with house demolitions, we don't just talk about house demolitions in the West Bank or East Jerusalem or Gaza. We're talking about, and in fact, there are some years in which more homes of Palestinians are demolished inside 48, inside Israel, than in the occupied territories. But, because it's Israel, that's kind of an accepted state. That's sort of outside of the political discourse, and we're only focusing on the 22% that's occupied. We have to be careful to have the whole thing. So with house demolitions, there's been about almost 500,000 Palestinian homes demolished. Homes, schools, mosques, churches, community buildings, universities have been demolished since 1948. So it's a key part of the ethnic cleansing strategy, of the Judaization. That's a term that I'm really trying to push people to use. We use a lot of terms that have legal references: occupation, apartheid. Judaization, isn't that kind of a term, but it's a term that's used by the Zionist movement and by Israel for all these years to, in other words, the whole point of Zionism, the whole point of Israeli settler colonialism is to transform an Arab country into a Jewish country, to transform Palestine into Israel, to Judaize the country. And that term really captures the essence of what we're talking about more than any other one. It's not a term we hardly ever use, but it's a term that we should be using. Because that brings in then the whole country and the political logic of the settler colonialism. So when we resist, we try to put everything under that kind of an umbrella to sort of bring a certain focus and a certain unity to all the different kinds of outrages that we're trying to resist. And part of our resistance just on the ground, because Issa is always saying, and I think he's right, what he was saying to the Norwegian organization today and to others is, okay, you're there, you have budgets, you have agendas. What are you doing? If I don't feel you on the ground, then what are you really doing here? You might issue a report here or there, but... And so we really try to be felt on the ground by the Palestinian community. And so in addition to resisting the demolition of homes, if we can get there in time, because we're connected to Palestinian communities that tell us they're coming to demolish, because all demolitions are done on the spur of the moment. People know maybe that they have a demolition order, but they don't know when they're going to come. They could come next week, tomorrow, in 5 years. So we don't have much warning, and we try to resist. But a lot of our resistance has to do with rebuilding homes that have been demolished. I think you mentioned maybe in the introduction that we've built almost 200 homes in the occupied territories, but also inside Israel with Palestinians, not for Palestinians. I mean, we couldn't do this work. If this was framed as good liberal Israelis helping their Palestinian victims, I mean, Palestinians would never cooperate with us, and they shouldn't. This is what's really important. These are joint acts of resistance. In other words, it isn't humanitarian. I mean, what's 200 houses out of 500,000 that have been demolished? I mean, and we're not the UN. We're not humanity, Habitat for Humanity. We don't have those budgets. But if you think about 200 in the atmosphere that Issa is describing, 200 events in which Israelis come with internationals. I mean, there's been Norwegians that have come to our camps as well. And over the years, we've built together 200 homes of Palestinians. That is meaningful in a political resistance sense. So we do that, but at the same time, we're also very political. And we understand that resistance is half of the story, but the other half is having a political program. And what our resistance on the ground has done is really show us what Israel's intentions are, how Israel does what it does, what the political logic of Israeli Zionist settler colonialism is. So we've been able to parlay our knowledge of what's happening on the ground, our reading of what's happening on the ground with house demolitions, into an analysis that then leads us into a political program. And that's led us into the One Democratic State campaign, the idea that we have to move towards one democratic state. So in other words, the resistance leads us into an analysis which leads us into a political program.
Well, let's talk about the One Democratic States campaign. But before I just want to, if people don't, so there's different, because you were talking about Area C, and many people don't know that the West Bank might be, or you might not know that the West Bank is divided into Area A, Area B, Area C, and it's different laws for the different people that live there, if you're Israeli or Palestinian.
According to Oslo Agreement.
Yes.
Oslo.
Which Norwegians very much pride themselves in, and
they should repent for.
Yes. But-
Oslo fake peace agreement.
Yes.
Exactly.
But if you, I'm not going to explain the different areas, but that's what you're talking about. So if you want to have a look, that's how the West Bank works. It has different laws for different people. But yeah, so the Oslo Accords, Norway prides themselves in trying to establish or work towards a two-state solution. And they also had the Global Alliance for implementing a two-state solution here in January, where they invited 86 different countries, and there were no representatives from Israel, for example, where they talk about a two-state and they don't want a two-state. And especially after October 7th, there's much less people who think that there is a possibility for a two-state solution. And you wrote an article saying that you don't think that that is possible, and that Israel has never intended to recognize a Palestinian state. So the one democratic state campaign, can you tell us a bit about the work that you do there?
Well, the two-state idea is ridiculous, not only because of the facts on the ground. I mean, there's 800,000 settlers almost in the occupied territory, and Gaza has been destroyed. So on the ground, there's no possibility of any meaningful, if there, Palestinian state that's sovereign, economically viable, or whatever, territorial, contiguous. But it also goes against the whole political logic of settler colonialism. And I go back to that because we need that analytical framework to understand. We all talk about a conflict. The Arab-Israeli conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, even the Palestinians talk about conflicts. It's not a conflict. It's not a conflict. And conflict traps the Palestinians because what's a conflict? Conflict has two sides, right? And you fight about something. Settler colonialism, like all forms of colonialism, is unilateral. No Zionist came at the turn of the 20th century and asked the Palestinians, could we colonize your country? Could we Judaize Palestine? Could we? They came and invaded the country. The term is to invade the country with the intent of taking it over. It was a hostile takeover. There was no conflict. The Palestinians had never had a fight with Jews. They were a peaceful people living on their lands, right? And they were invaded by a force that wanted to take over their country. So by calling it a conflict, what are you doing? Settler colonialism is illegal, it's immoral, it's unjust, right? But by all of a sudden giving them the status of a side in a conflict, you're legitimizing them. Now we're a side. Great. We're not foreigners. We're not invaders. We're a legitimate side. And now it becomes a conflict of national, identities and national aspirations that elevates settler colonialism to some kind of legitimate national expression in someone else's country, which it isn't. And what does it do to the Palestinians? Right? An entire people living on their lands that don't have an issue. There are no issues here. There are people that have a right to live in their lands with their own heritage and all of a sudden become a side. In other words, their whole existence is like reduced to being a side parallel, and this gets into what, you were asking about Issa and I, and what Issa was saying. There's a false symmetry because now there's two sides. So then you get the language we all hear all the time, both sides. I'm sure this alliance project, that was their language. Both sides should end the violence. Both sides should negotiate. You see? So all of a sudden the Palestinians find themselves, and they're not really, they're not equal sides because one side is a state. Israel's a state that has a right to an army. I mean, Biden will tell you that, and maybe your prime minister will tell you that Israel has a right to defend itself from the attacks of October 7th. You see, states have that power. What are Palestinians? They're non-state actors that have no right to resist. And their resistance is easy to turn into criminal terrorism because they're non-state actors that don't have a right to an army, don't have a right to, states, you never call states terrorists. States, the word terrorism is always applied to non-state actors. So the whole thing is messed up. And then with conflict, how do you resolve a conflict? You negotiate. Well, what are we asking Palestinians exactly to negotiate? How much of their country remains their country? How much of the land that's been stolen from them they have to relinquish? Because they're not going to, in these negotiations, Palestinians don't get anything. They can limit, the best they can do is limit how much they're losing. What do they have to negotiate? Like in a market? They have to barter about how many refugees can come back? There's 6 million refugees. What? Okay, Israel might accept 10,000 in the humanitarian old people that will die within 5 years. That will, so what are we going to start bartering about how many refugees? These are human beings that have rights. They're not. So the whole, it's a sick concept that Palestinians have been trapped into a conflict that leads nowhere. It can only lead to where we are, where Israel keeps winning all the time. So, because it's the stronger side. The Palestinians really aren't a side at all because, when we're in this normalization process that Trump is pushing, the Abraham Accords, Trump, Netanyahu, MBS, and Saudi Arabia, this whole thing about normalizing relations, ending the conflict, in that whole process since 2020, when Trump announced it, Palestinians were never consulted. Trump never sat down with any of the Palestinians, including Abu Mazen, to say, what do you think about the normalization? What are your demands? No. This was a deal between states. United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Egypt, the states. The non-state actors like Palestinians were left out. So that's that problem with framing this as a conflict. It's a dead end for Palestinians. And that's where the two-state idea comes in. Because then why do you end a conflict? Well, you compromise. One side gets 78% of the country, the other side gets, well, wait a minute now, maybe not 22% because now we have settlers, we have facts on the ground, well, maybe they'll get 20%, maybe they'll get 15%, maybe they'll get, you see, that's the dynamic, of course, of the whole thing. So we step back and say no to conflict. This is a settler colonial enterprise, and the only way out of settler colonialism is decolonization. You decolonize the entire country. Forget occupation, the entire country has been colonized. You have to dismantle the structures of domination and control, and then create a political system of equality for everyone. So I think so that's why I'll just finish. That's why, I'm talking maybe more as a professor, but it's important. That's why this conceptual framework of settler colonialism is so important, because settler colonialism and conflict each have a different logic. And the only logic that will liberate Palestinians is the logic of decolonization that liberation comes out of. That comes out of a settler colonial. Now, you're not going to get there by talking about two states and conflict. So that's really important. And settler colonialism, interesting enough, has broken through. I mean, we do use that term quite a bit. We don't always milk it enough. In other words, it's become a kind of a slogan because most people aren't academics. And, so it's a good slogan, settler colonialism, but we have to unpack it for people and really explain, like I've tried to do in the last few minutes, what the political logic is. And if you understand that, you'll never have an alliance kind of a meeting. You'll know that the two-state solution is bullshit. I don't have to explain it. Once you understand the logic of settler colonialism, of course there's no two states. There's never been the idea of two states at all. And so, that's why it's important that we begin to develop an anti-colonial discourse and engage with our politicians and the media on that level. We have to frame. Until now, they, led by Israel, has framed this in the conflict way. And the conflict way, of course, is the other side isn't negotiating good faith. The Palestinians, they're the terrorists, and that's the framework that people accept. Part of our job, you're asking what we want of you, is to help us reframe this conflict in anti-colonial terms and release that logic, get people to understand that logic, and then that will begin to lead them forward, I think. It'll become obvious to a politician that what I'm advocating is not right. Now, they still might do it because the two-state solution is a good tool of conflict management. If you don't want to expend the political capital, you don't want to get into a fight with Trump if you're Norway, you want to sell oil and everything else, you know that you're bullshitting. But you're doing it, you're using the two-state idea not because you really believe it, but as a conflict management tool because you have other priorities. But at any rate, it will help us to call their bluff if we begin to reframe this as an anti-colonial struggle.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode of Palestinapodden with Jeff Halper and Issa Amro. Stay tuned for part 2. Free Palestine.